All right, guys, I'm going to preface this one with a little bit of geekdom. I have to fanboy out here because those who know me, those who listen to the show, know that long before I entered the restaurant game, I was a journalism student. I studied journalism many, many, many years ago, and the man who was responsible for me wanting to become a journalist is here with us today. I remember being 12, 13 years old, and most people wanted, most of my friends wanted to be Hulk Hogan or Shawn Michaels. Not me, man. I wanted to be Bill Apter. I wanted to be the guy beside the ring, seeing all these cool things and writing about it. So it is my pleasure, it is my honor to today say I can actually bring on one of my heroes as a child to the show today. Please welcome Wonderful Willie himself, Mr. Bill Apter.
It is a pleasure to be here. I've enjoyed the show. Both of you are terrific on this show. So I'm a fan as well. So I'm honored to be be here. So and you two are in Canada, correct?
We're in Toronto, Canada. Yes.
All right. I'm in the suburbs of Philadelphia, the old ECW land, so to say. And yeah, it's great to, I'm a New Yorker living in Pennsylvania. I loved my trips to every part of Canada, especially Toronto during the early days of Frank Tunney, the promoter there, and the Sheik and Abdullah Farouk and Lord Athol Leighton, and quite a history. Because Toronto, when I used to see photos that our freelancers would send in from Maple Leaf, was the only arena in the world that I saw that had that long walkway for the guys to come into the ring. So the fans couldn't grab them or hurt them or whatever. And I used to love that whole setup. And the people in Canada have always been so nice to me. So I'm thrilled to be here.
What arena was that, Bill? Was that Maple Leaf Gardens?
Maple Leaf Gardens, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, what I'd like to say is that I know that we're going to sit back and enjoy the next 30 to 45 minutes with Bill because we haven't even asked him a question yet, and we're already getting amazing stories.
Oh, well, thank you.
Right?
And while we're on,
listen, I always tell people say I'm a historian. I'm not a historian. I'm a storyteller. That's what I am. I've been around this business, watching it since 1965, 1966, when I was growing up, and in the business since 1970. So it's been my whole life. If you ask me the date of a title change, I can't tell you. If you ask me a story about that title change, I can tell you.
Well, that's fantastic stuff, and I want to get to everything with you, Bill, and I want to kind of
I'm really out of time.
Well, we got to go home here. We're getting to go home here. I want to take a page out of your book, actually, Bill. Your book is absolutely fantastic. And I kind of want to jump all over the place. I love the way that you did that in your book, how you told stories. And since we're on the topic of Toronto, let's stick with Toronto and can we get some stories just about the atmosphere back in the day at Maple Leaf Gardens with guys like the Sheik on top, who had a legendary run in Toronto? What are some of your memories of working with guys like that in Toronto?
Well, it was amazing because Abdullah Farouk, who was the Grand Wizard in the Northeast here, many times had told me to come up to Toronto and take pictures of he and the Sheik. And the first few times I met the original Sheik, he stayed in character. He did not speak English to me. I'd ask him a question, he goes, and Grand Wizard would translate it. Until the Sheik knew that I was really becoming a piece of the business, he wouldn't let me in on anything, including, like I said, that he was able to speak English. The reception of the Sheik as one of the most hated wrestlers in history was so evident up in Toronto and every place he wrestled in Canada. He was very feared. He spent his whole life in his gimmick. And then when I got to know him personally, he was one of the nicest people I ever knew. I know I say that a lot about a lot of people, but he was the first guy I ever saw throw fire. his matches against Abdullah the Butcher and Bobo Brazil are legendary. Yeah, so it was great. But being backstage there, a lot of the guys from the WWF and WWF traveled up there. So it was a great territory because Frank Tunney and Jack Tunney gave me complete access to the dressing rooms and everything. So there I was taking pictures of the Sheik and Abdullah Farouk, Bob Backlund, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. The Tunneys brought in everyone. They were very much loved by the entire wrestling community. It's a great territory.
Oh, absolutely. Very rich history down here in Toronto for sure. And I like that you mentioned that the Tunneys were very welcoming to you. That's our Canadian nature, of course, to be welcoming and inviting to everybody. But some people weren't as welcoming, correct? Were there certain people that got what you did and how important that you could help spread the word for their territories better than other people?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Some of the there was one promoter who will remain nameless in Georgia, which was one of my home territories. I was there regularly. I was doing PWI, Pro Wrestling Illustrated, scouting reports on their TV. But there was one promoter in one of the small towns that kept saying, he's not coming in here. I don't want anyone seeing my matches in those picture magazines. That happened there. And then there was a night in a small town in Texas where I was traveling for the week with Terry Funk. And he said, Apter, tonight I'm going against Ivan Putski. So we go into the small town and the promoter says, I don't care who he is. He's not coming into my house to shoot. He can buy a ticket like everyone else. So Terry Funk and Ivan Putski both told the promoter, Putski, Bill Apter can't shoot here. I'm not in a match tonight. And Funk would say, screw this. We're not going to get in the magazine. And she changed her mind very, very, very quickly. And then there were the years that you saw in the book, Is Wrestling Fixed?
You tell me. I didn't know it was broken. I do
Thank
it every
you.
time.
Yeah.
Bill, something about me on our show, my gimmick is I tend to screw up everything. Look at that's a fantastic
Read
book
it.
there.
Is Wrestling Fixed? I didn't know it was broken. So after we were banned by the WWE, WWF back then, because they had their own magazine, and I was offered at times to become their editor. And I was always loyal to Stanley Weston, my mentor, the person who started me. So I never accepted the job, but they didn't want any part of the newsstand wrestling magazines. I was welcome to talk to the guys at the hotel. Once in a while, I was welcome backstage, but it was more of don't let these outside guys, me, George Napolitano, and some of the other guys, don't let them take pictures or do interviews or anything, because we want our guys just to be in our magazine.
Interesting.
And there was a lot of anger in there. One of the stories that's not in the book, that's not an exclusive here, is when WWF started their magazine, they called it Victory Magazine. That was their first issue. And the magazines I was working for at GC London Publishing Company had in the corner of the magazine, in the circle, Victory Sports Series. So my boss got a hold of the legal people with WWF and said, that's a trademark name of my company. And that they had to stop publishing Victory magazine, and that became the WWF magazine.
Wow.
So so there was a natural business dislike for the company I was working for at that time. That's exclusive.
Yeah, we're gonna send that out everywhere. Bill Apter exclusive right here on Count It Out. Amazing stuff, Mike. I know you've got a million questions, man.
I'm dying. All right, Bill. I want to talk about your legacy just a little bit here. I want to ask you. So, my introduction to you, I was probably about 12 or 13 years old. And I read an article that was given to me that was written by you about that was written shortly after the death of Art Barr, who was one of my favorites of all time.
Beetlejuice, yeah.
And that article just spoke to me, and I just needed to read more by you. And somebody tells me, yeah, you got to read more Apter mags. And that stuck with me for the rest of my life. I got to ask you, Bill, when's the first time you heard the term Apter mags, and how did that make you feel to know that you became part of wrestling lingo? People,
do you know who came up with that?
Your name now as a term in everyday lingo. That's crazy. How does that make you feel?
It makes me feel great in a way, and I'll tell you why. Do you know who came up with that?
No.
Dave Meltzer. And I love Dave.
Oh, no.
No. Dave and I have been very good friends. Dave and I used to talk in the days when talking to Dave Meltzer was illegal. You know, if anyone found out in one of the wrestling offices. So he started putting that in his newsletter. And I called him one day and I said, Dave, these are not the Apter mags. I said, I work for the company. These are Stanley Weston's magazines. He said, well, people see you on TV as the face of the magazines. So that's why I call them the Apter mags. So I was very grateful that it became the term to go with that people talk about today, but it was the Weston mags, because if there wasn't any Stanley Weston, I don't know if there would be any Apter mags, so to speak. But it's flattering to me, it really is. But I always like to let people know where it came from. And, Dave flattered me by saying that. And again, I was on TV in almost every territory. Jim Crockett put me on every week in the Pro Wrestling Illustrated scouting reports. I was on in Georgia, the Carolinas, Joe Pedicino's Pro Wrestling This Week, which was syndicated. I was in Texas. So yeah, I became the face of the magazines, even though I never owned the magazines. I was never the head editor of the magazines, because that's a sit in the office and put in the right words thing. That's not my thing. I always wanted to be out there where the action was and be the reporter. And that's, but I'm flattered by that term. I really am.
You brought up Meltzer, which brings me to my next question, actually. With the Weston mags and with PWI and so forth,
do you mind, by the way, if I have a sip of my?
Oh, absolutely.
Please go ahead.
Absolutely.
It's my favorite drink.
You guys kept very close to kayfabe back in the day with those magazines.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel when you've seen journalists such as Meltzer and others go away from kayfabe and start to break kayfabe over the years? Was it just evolution, or did you try to fight it at all?
No, we didn't try to fight that. When I came on to work for Stanley Weston, that was the way his magazines were. His magazines were just talking about the wrestling stories, or if there wasn't a good story on someone, we'd make something up. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we'd call and get approval, and sometimes we didn't. There were a lot of wrestlers who were on the hot seat that I would start an interview with, and they, after 2 questions, they say, listen, you do this thing better than we do. Just keep it in character, okay? You'd be surprised at some of the top wrestlers that, what you gonna do, brother, that would tell me something like that, to do that. We were a different fan business than Dave Meltzer. We always got the Observer at the office. He always sent it to us complimentary, but that's not what we did. So the amount of people that he had reading the Wrestling Observer was nowhere near the amount of people that our magazines were, because we were distributed worldwide.
Right.
Yeah. So no, I mean, that was Dave's intent, was that he was always doing that. And that's, we were he was the journalist doing this. We were more of the putting stuff out to make people interested. We were a fan magazine. He was he is and was an insider newsletter.
Okay, perfect.
So I never felt weird about it. That's sparkling ice coming up. No, I never felt weird about it. It's just that's what Dave's business was. But again, if a promoter found out that you talked to Dave Meltzer, the promoter didn't want you at his shows.
Of course.
Dave and I talked a lot. We would exchange results on Monday when we started doing the PWI Weekly. Always had an hour conversation. We'd exchange results back and forth. Right. Yeah, I like Dave. He's always been a good guy.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So So Bill, I think I can
Not a
speak.
lot of people I don't like in this.
Well, yeah, and you've been so helpful to a lot of people's careers as well. Like, and I know for this generation, maybe that didn't come up with so much as the magazines. Now we're on the internet, but these magazines were very helpful for people's careers. I learned about the NWA over here in Toronto. We didn't get a lot of access to the Four Horsemen, and we would see Ric Flair in the blood, and I was like, whoa, what am I missing out here? Exactly, right? And you've had a front row seat for some of the most iconic moments in the history of the business.
Well, no, I never had a front row seat.
Well, you had a better than a front row seat. You had a better than a front row seat.
By the way, just to back up on something you just said, is that I remember when number one, Paul Jones, who wrestled in Florida and the Carolinas, came to Madison Square Garden for the first time. And he wasn't a regular, it was a guest spot. I remember him going into the employees entrance with me and up the elevator, and fans outside knew who he was. And he looked at me and he said, you know what, thank you, because if it wasn't for the magazines, none of those people here would have known who I am, because there was no cable TV at that point. There were regular Florida shows being shown on UHF TV, but he wasn't on those shows usually. So yeah, the magazines introduced, people were getting bookings. I'd get calls from promoters. You guys had this guy in the magazine. Can he wrestle? Can he work? Yeah. So yeah. I just wanted to answer that before.
That's a cool little story add in there too. For me, I always loved when you guys put out the almanacs as well. I've worn those things out. I still have them in my other room right now. They were my Bible, quote unquote. Like I was memorizing everything in there. A lot of my fandom and my knowledge as a wrestling fan comes from those specific almanacs as well.
That's great to know. And I was not a large part of the almanac or the 500. We can talk about the 500.
Oh yeah, we're definitely going to get into the 500.
But with the almanac, that was one or two editors who would be put on that strictly to get that out. And Bob Smith, perhaps, or Eddie Elner or Brandy, one of them would be put on those that assignment, or Stu Sachs, to do that, so it didn't interfere with the rest of the getting the magazines out on time.
Oh, okay. Well, since we're on the topic of the 500, let's talk about the PWA 500 a little bit. Next to the awards episode, the awards issue, which was my personal favorite of the year, the PWA 500 is one of the most legendary things that you guys have done. How much heat did you guys get from some of the boys? Did anyone ever get worked up at the rankings?
Still happens, even though I haven't been with that company for 20 plus years. We were sitting around the desk one time, all the editors, and somebody talked about doing a PWI 100 after some, I don't know, it might have been Fortune magazine or something. And then Bob Smith said, why don't we do 500? Stu Sachs looked at him, he said, fine, you can do it. So Bob was one of the nicest people in the whole world. He's still on Twitter and you can find him. But on the days Bob was doing the 500, writing the capsule profiles of the 500, you go, good morning, Bob, leave me alone. So what we would do, we all went into the editors, we went into a conference room day one, when we knew what the deadline would be, and we all ranked the top 100. We did the list of the top 100. After that, it was Bob's baby. And Bob sometimes would come over to me, what do you think about putting this guy number 150 or 175? But after like 100, everybody kept falling into almost the same categories. We always picked the number 1 and the number 500 at the same time, because those were the most popular, most important ones that people had wanted to see. But oh my God, it's just like I did the rankings, the top 10 rankings for all the territories, and the heat that I would get in the dressing rooms from the rankings alone for wrestlers. Hey, you put Jay Strongbow number 3 when I beaten him 6 times, and I'm number 4. Well, the magazines are printed 3 months in advance, et cetera, et cetera. I had a system for doing this. But the 500, when you talk about lighting a flame under people's tushes to get angry, whoa, you have no idea the heat that I got And I'd say, I'm not the only person that I didn't, they see me out there. So I'm the guy that's
You're the guy.
responsible for the PWI 500.
I know on the flip side, from the fan point of view, we used to always debate them. Me and my friends would get that, and I'm like, oh no. And I remember specifically the year that Dean Malenko got put at the #1 spot.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was like, they nailed it. I was a huge Dean Malenko guy, and I had to argue with everybody, like, what is Dean Malenko? And I'd look at his year. Oh, it was a great memories I have as well.
We based it upon the like the wins, losses, and how classic of a wrestler the person would be. And also, Dean Malenko was one of the few people that became #1 that wasn't the main cover guy, because he was not someone people would just go and buy the magazine. The people that were on the cover, Stanley Weston's business was to sell magazines. Okay. So we always put on the cover. So that's why you'd see Bruno, Mil Mascaras, Dusty Rhodes, Tommy Rich, all the people that were nationally famous on those magazines. Yeah.
So you mentioned the name Bruno Sammartino, and I'm not going to take anything away from your book. If you guys want to hear the full story on this, you have to get the book, Is Wrestling Fixed?
I didn't know it was broken.
See, we got a running gimmick going here. Yeah. But you tell an incredible story about the night that Bruno Sammartino lost the world title. And I'm not going to give the story away, but I'm wondering if you can take us inside of the arena that night, because the footage is not the greatest, that we can go back and watch as fans.
You're talking about the night they first lost to Ivan Koloff?
To Ivan Koloff. When he lost the belt that first time, you hear all the stories about it. You were in the building. We only get stories now. Can you take us into the building and try your best to recreate that night for us?
I wanted to interview Bruno before the match, and his manager, Arnold Skolin, just said he'll talk to you maybe after the match. He's concentrating. There were rumors that Bruno had several ribs hurt by George the Animal Steele a few nights earlier, but it's people talking about that. Anyway, when Bruno came out, his only theme music, they didn't have theme music back there, was 21,000 fans all chanting, Bruno, Bruno, Bruno. It was deafening. It was deafening. And when Bruno lost the title, when Koloff came off the ropes, and Bruno lied there, and Arnold Skolin, his manager, came in the ring, and the referee raised Koloff's arm, but did not give him the belt because they thought there was going to be a riot there. They didn't give him the belt in the ring. It was dead silence. All the photography people, me, George Napolitano, Frank Amato, and I think Paul Heyman may have been there at that point too. We all thought we were having trouble hearing. There were people crying in the audience. It was dead silence. It's like someone shot Bruno and he died. Wow. I went back to the dressing room area. Captain Lou Albano, before he was a captain, he was just Lou Albano at that time, called me over with Koloff, did an exclusive interview, which you can find on www.onewrestlingvideo.com. That still exists. And I talked to Bruno, and he said, well, doggone it, Bill, what can I tell you? He said, on this night, Koloff was better than I was. He had no excuses. Yeah. But it was when I was going home that night, all the people on the subway that were crowded into the trains going back to their home from Madison Square Garden, it was a state of shock. The subways were quiet. Full cars of subways, quiet. Can't believe that Bruno lost. That was the only thing on people's minds. And the New York City newspapers covered it as well. That's how big it was.
Wow.
Yeah, but it was shocking because Mr. Weston didn't tell me what was going to happen. He said to me, are you going to the Garden tonight? I said, yeah. He said, you got your camera? Yeah, well, make sure you have lots of film for the main event. And my dad, who used to accompany me to the matches, they let him sit in the press section with me. He had a little junky Instamatic camera, and his pictures came out better than mine.
No kidding, eh?
Right.
So,
but yeah, it was a shocking night. It was, the whole world stood still inside of Madison Square Garden. And I remember looking at his fan club president, Georgianne Orsi, in the front row directly across from us, and she was hysterical crying. It's terrible.
That's crazy.
You know, by the way, not to get off this, when you were just reclining there a little, Mike, look a little like Seth Rollins. Has anyone said that?
Oh, wow. Eh?
Like if Seth Rollins married Henry.
You know what, Bill?
Wait. If Seth Rollins married Henry Winkler and had a kid.
Bill, what do you do every Tuesday? I think I need a new partner. I would love to replace Tyler with you.
Okay, listen, I'm going to tell you what I do every Tuesday, and then we'll go back to Bruno. Every Tuesday night, along with the voice of choice, Bruce Wirt, and Ken Resnick, the classic broadcaster from AWA and WWE, WWF back then, we host a wonderful podcast on vocnation.com called Wrestling with History.
Oh.
And that records every Tuesday night. It's dropped, I like to say aired, every Wednesday on VOC Nation. It's available on Apple Podcasts and everything. There's a video version of it, and we're going premium soon, where I will be bringing my old classic cassette interviews from back in the 70s from all the territories onto the premium area as well.
We will make sure to put the link to that in the bio of this interview. If anybody didn't catch that, you can click on that and get straight to that podcast.
VOCnation.com. Yeah. But getting back to that night with Bruno, you just walked me into a plug there. I know. So, but getting back to Bruno, through all the years I covered him from the end of 1970 through his retirement and up to his passing, he was the most incredible gentleman, sportsman that I have ever met.
Okay. I got a quick follow up, and I want to throw to Mike, because I know, Mike, you're gonna bang off a bunch after this.
We got to do 2 or 3 more episodes.
Oh, I think so. I think so. I could talk to you forever, Bill. The stories are just incredible so far, and I kind of want to go back to a little bit more of the atmospheres that you were just describing there. You've been in the industry, and you've come through what I like to consider the Mount Rushmore of the WWF, WWF, and WWE. The big face of the company have always been Bruno Sammartino, and then it went into Hulk Hogan and Hulkamania, into Austin 316, and then finally with John Cena has kind of been the last.
We got to put Bret Hart on that.
Bret Hart, of course, we're the Canadians in us.
That's right.
Can you kind of explain the different atmospheres each guy that I just kind of named there brought to the arenas? You got a different pop from Hulk Hogan and a different energy to Austin to.
Yeah, no, I get it. So Bruno brought the air of legit wrestler. Okay, who was the second guy?
Hogan.
Hogan brought the air of Hulkamania, brother. What you gonna do? He brought the air of showmanship into the WWF like no one else ever had.
And then so, like inside Madison Square Garden, how different was the energy when compared to Bruno to Hogan?
Two different. It was the same type of energy, but it was a different type of fan.
Okay,
if that makes sense.
It does.
With Hogan had theme music. Bruno didn't.
Mm-hmm.
So fans would start with Bruno, the anticipation before he came out. When they knew he was going to come out, the chants of Bruno were what I Am an All-American became, a Real American became for Hulk Hogan's entrance.
That's cool. I get goosebumps just thinking about that. That's really cool. And then Steve Austin would be, when that glass breaks, it's a different type of energy.
Yeah, different type of thing. You had a tougher crowd. You had people flipping the bird and cursing when he came out.
Yeah.
But it was all in fun. And then with John Cena.
Yeah,
with John Cena, it was a different type of thing because you had fans who loved him and for some reason hated him, and they would cheer and boo at the same time. That never happened with the other 3 guys.
It's different energy, different eras. I
like
it.
Question,
and thank you. Yeah. And you got to experience all that. Mike, what do you want to know from Bill here, man? There's so much I don't even know. My head's spinning.
You know what? I'm actually going to skip a couple questions and use that as a segue. I'm going to go to let's talk about the eras here. It's a 2-piece question, Bill. Number 1, do you have a favorite era? I mean, you say you've been watching since the 60s. Is there a personal favorite era that you have of professional wrestling?
Yeah. The in terms of quality in terms of the territory not being there, but still living on in people's minds. That would be the Jim Crockett Atlanta era in that period, and Florida.
Mhm.
That to me was, I look back at that, and I still talk to Magnum TA and Nikita Koloff pretty regularly, and we're always reminiscing, because those days in those territories that the Crockett's ran just had a flair
Ooh.
to it.
Ooh.
Yeah, but even before he was the major big star. Well, let me take that back. Not before he was a major big star, but that territory, if you look at it, Magnum, Nikita, the Road Warriors, Cornette and all his people. I mean, really, it was just even the lower guys lower on the card were still, you knew that they were going to become something.
No, absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned him, Nikita. He's a friend of our show. We actually got the privilege to interview Nikita as well, and he had some wonderful stories too.
I always loved when he talked about Magnum TA.
Yeah.
He never called him Magnum TA. Go, Magnum. Yeah. Yeah, and then of course Dusty was central in Crockett and Florida and Atlanta as well. He was a huge part of that those territories there. So yeah, that was, to me, that was territory that personally in my career, that I loved going everywhere, but I was in that Crockett and Florida and Atlanta territory more than anywhere else, other than New York, of course.
Of course. So,
Mike,
so my
you're on a roll.
follow-up
Keep going, buddy.
So my follow-up to that is, at the end of your book, you said that you have been a lifelong fan and you are still a fan.
Yes.
Does that mean, do you still follow, keep up with professional wrestling? And if so, what do you watch? Because there's so much wrestling.
Monday night I watch Raw.
Okay.
Tuesday night I tape my podcast and I DVR Impact. Wednesday night I channel turn between AEW and NXT. Thursday night I do things like we are doing right now. Friday night I watch SmackDown. Saturday and Sunday I try and devote to my wife, and when she's not around, I'm generally taping something for OneWrestlingVideo.com. So and I have a full-time day job that I do at the same time. Once the relationship with the magazines pretty much ended, and it came back recently, we got to talk about that.
Oh yeah.
Is a friend of mine was working as a job coach, helping people with disabilities.
That's right.
To find jobs and job coach them. So I've been working for a company called AHEAD, AHEDD. It's an acronym. Don't ask me what it. Look it up, everybody. But I do that full time, and I do the wrestling thing full time, and they blend in very well, because a lot of employers will go like, Bill Apter, I know you. How can I help you? Well, I have this great candidate who does data entry that saw your ad and would like to work in your chiropractor's office, something like that. Not, you have a disability, well, McDonald's is right down the road going white tables. That's not it. It's what people want to do and helping them make what they want to do. So yeah, so that's my week. And while we're talking about I mentioned the magazine, I got a call from Kenny McIntosh, who a lot of people follow online. He does, he's in Scotland, and Kenny for years have been a part of the wrestling business. He's very well known in the United Kingdom and Scotland, and he has Inside the Ropes is a very big brand there. And he and Dante Richardson called me one day and said that we're going to start a magazine, and we want to know if you'd like to be part of it. And here's what we'll pass. Oh, you mean a newsstand magazine? Yes. And our plans are maybe after 6 months to bring it into the United States. This sounds great. And the first beginning of it, we'll do it digitally. So I said, well, let me see what it looks like. Well, they hadn't done issue 1 yet, but now they're up to issue number 6, working on issue number 7. And they've got a InsideTheRopesMagazine.com, But look, this is the latest issue.
Oh,
Look who's on the
wow.
cover.
That's,
They made it
that's
like an
huge.
old school magazine. And I have a, on page 39, every month I have the Apter Chat column.
Nice.
And you can get this on the website inside the ropesmagazine.com. But look, here, great layouts. I mean, it's a real wrestling magazine.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I miss
is
those.
Yeah.
And for those young listeners and viewers of ours, this is what Tyler and I grew up with. This is why we have Bill Apter on the show right now, because we grew up with those magazines that Bill would write. So if you are
wait. I appreciate that, but I didn't write a lot. I wrote my columns.
Yeah.
I was on the road 80% of the time. Wrote my columns. I did the photos, and I wrote stories when I could. But we had great writers, Mike. We had absolutely great writers. Again, Brandy Minkiewicz, Dan Shockett, who was real. People all think Dan didn't exist. Dan died at a very young age of cancer. He was replaced by Eddie Elner, who you can find on Facebook. He owns a yoga studio in California. Peter King, Stu Sachs, Craig Peters, who was on TV with me quite a few times. They did the bulk of the writing. I did the bulk of giving them the story and reporting on it. And I didn't mean to stop you there, but
no, of course.
No. But they did the bulk of the writing of the stories when I reported what went on from the road, if that makes sense.
It does.
And I did, unfortunately, the same thing I do on One Wrestling Video right now. Unfortunately, I did most of the obits because I knew most of these guys so well, starting with the first one, David Von Erich, when he died. And now, on One Wrestling Video, anytime somebody dies, it's me doing the obit. But no, thank you for what you said, that you grew up on the magazines, and we all collected them.
Yeah.
We all collected them. And there was a girl in a Walmart about 6 months ago stocking the magazine shelf. And I saw that she had a Monster magazine that I used to collect. I said, I used to collect those. She said, people used to collect these things? So go on with your story, please.
You actually brought up something that I wanted to bring up. I'm glad you talked about your photography. Because I had a question I've been wondering about for years and years and years. I can finally get it answered.
Go for it.
One of the most famous pictures in the history of professional wrestling was on the cover of PWI, and that is of Ric Flair standing there with the title and a bandage on his forehead.
Yeah.
I need to know, Bill, is that your picture?
It is. I took that. I don't own the photo. PWI owns everything.
Right.
I shot is owned by them.
Can you tell me about that day? Can you tell me about that shoot?
Flair didn't like to pose. Flair always told me to take pictures of him in the ring, but he was back there. I had the studio set up completely there. And I just asked him if he wouldn't mind doing that, and he went for it. But the story behind that is years later, Shawn Michaels told me that he got a copy of the PWI cover that you could put yourself on the cover, a fanzine thing, and he posed with the belt and
that's right.
the bandage
I
on
remember
it.
hearing that as well.
Yeah, Rick was very hard to pose in the studio. He really didn't like doing that.
Staying on the topic of your photos, are there any that you're really proud of looking back on that you're like, I nailed that one, like, or just some?
Anytime I'd shoot Neil Mascaras, who was one of my favorite wrestlers of all time, doing the dive off the top rope. There was one of Taz doing a suplex on Sabu where I just got them.
I know that one as well.
Yeah, and a lot of the rest. Superstar Billy Graham in Times Square standing on top of a garbage can with his shirt off, flexing. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
By the way, when that was going on, there was a crowd of people in Times Square. And as the crowd was breaking up, when Graham got off the garbage can, this guy comes over to me, he says, Mr. Apter, my name's Herb Abrams. I'm going to be a wrestling promoter one day. You know how many people have said I'm going to be a wrestling? He said, listen, I have a, where do you live? I told him I live in Queens. I got a dress shop in Flushing. If you can get me any wrestlers to come to my store, I'll give your wife free dresses. Okay. So I got Billy White Wolf and Chief J Strongbow to come to that, and that put the key in the ignition of Herb Abrams becoming a promoter.
What a character he was too.
Yeah, and again, there's a chapter in Is Wrestling Fixed?
I
Mike?
didn't know it was broken.
And
there's a
you
whole
just
chapter.
proved right there, Bill. You just proved right there why I am so glad that both Tyler and I, because of our busy lifestyles, being in restaurants, we both listened to your book on Audible.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
And I'm so glad we did, because right there you just prove your voices, your impressions,
I do
the way you animate yourself through the recording of. I'm so glad you decided to do that book yourself and not hand it over to a narrator, because
they were going to do that.
Oh no!
ECW Press had a deal with Audible. Okay, so one day I get a call from a guy out in California. Hi, Mr. Apter. My name is Michael. Yes, and I'm going to be the voice of your book. I said, huh? He said, I'm going to be the voice of your book. I said, no, I should be the voice of my book. Well, you know, they're concerned that, like, if you don't have a professional studio, you're going to pop the peas. I've been a professional broadcaster my whole life. So I said, I'll get back to you. So I called someone and I said, this deal doesn't go through unless I do this. Well, Bill, you know, you don't have I said, rent a studio, something. There's a studio a mile away from where I live. I can probably get it done in a few days. So then I get a call back from Michael saying that they will allow me to do the quotes, but he'll do I said, no. I said, my fans know my voice. They know what I sound like. I don't want an announcer saying K-fob instead of kayfabe, you know. No, I said, so they let me do it. It took 4 nights. I did it all in one take, except one chapter. It took 4 nights, because I mispronounced someone's name. 4 nights of 5 hours each, 20 hours to do it. And thank you for saying that, because I do the voices of all.
I'm so glad you fought for that, because it
really added to the book.
It made the book more special.
I couldn't see Michael doing Dusty Rhodes. If you get the Dusty Rhodes Audible book, it's terrible, because they have a guy going, my name's Dusty Rhodes, and I'm oh my God.
But my favorite one that I listened to on Audible was when they had a British guy do Bob Holly's book.
I haven't heard that.
So
yes, and I almost killed the chap.
Yeah. What is Sparky Plug?
Yeah. What is Sparky Plug? That's great.
Now, as we're getting we're winding down the time here. Unless you have something really imperative there, Tyler, I want to do a little bit of word association. What do you think, Ty?
I love doing this.
I would love to. If I could sneak in one more question before we do
Absolutely.
word association, because I'm torn. I've got the couple here, but I'd love for you.
We're going to do this again, right?
100%. 100%.
I'll be back 20 minutes from now.
Okay, Bill. I'm gonna put 2 options out there. No, you know what? I want to go with this one. I want to go with. Can you just talk a little bit about the Texas territory with the Von Erichs? I know you had a great relationship with the family. Can you try to explain to people, because you hear it all the time? Oh, it was on fire down there. It was on fire, but it really was it was crazy down there. Can you talk about that a little bit before we go into word association?
It was their own little territory that eventually they got TV and went worldwide. But the fans' support of the Von Erich family was like nothing I'd ever seen before. And I traveled with the Von Erichs regularly, and a lot of they used to tell me that I'm an honorary Von Erich, and I loved that. I really did. Many times I flew on commercial airlines with them and the Freebirds. Freebirds was a great part of that, because anytime we were getting ready to land, you always had to put $5 down on how many bumps the plane would make to see. I never won.
That's
fun. Always split it. But when David died, he was the first Von Erich to perish. The service and the thousands of people that gathered inside and outside the chapel, you knew that the Von Erich family was a respected family in the whole state of Texas, and people came from all different states to see this. But the turnout there, just from the people in Texas, told you what the Von Erichs meant to everyone. Yeah, so it was great. The fans were on fire. The territory, Gino Hernandez, Tully Blanchard, I mean, Percy Pringle. I mean, it was incredible. The Missing Link, Skandar Akbar. Wow, great stuff. And the claw hold, Fritz Von Erich.
That's
yeah.
right.
And in my book, as you know, there's a terrifying story that I went through with Fritz Von Erich, but you gotta listen to the Audible version or read the book for that.
Yeah, I highly recommend the Audible version of that book.
So it was one of the most terrifying times of my career. And thank God Gary Hart was one of the two people who put out the fire for me. He was great. He'd call me up once a week. My man, how you doing? You want to talk some wrestling? He was terrific.
He's a book that I'm trying. So it's so hard to find his book right now. And I would love to read that book.
I didn't read the book. I knew the guy.
Yeah, he was fantastic. One of the most underrated managers, I think, of all time.
Absolutely.
So I know your time is valuable here.
One of the most.
Yeah, he had a great mind. That's right.
Great wrestling mind.
As Mike said, I know we're winding down here, and we don't want to keep you too much longer. But Mike, you want to do a quick little word association?
I really do. And Tyler, I know I put you on the spot. I didn't tell you I'm going to do this, so I'm going to throw a couple out. And if
I've got 1,000 in my head, I can't even pick what I want to talk to Bill about.
All right. I want to start off, Bill. You don't have to do this in one word. Just tell me the first thing that comes to your mind when I say these names.
Okay.
I'm going to start with Stu Hart.
Stu used to call me, or I'd call him, and I tell him I only have a minute. For 20 minutes, he'd be going, I used to go to school with your boss, and he Ed more than any human being other than my grandfather. I was with Stu and Helen at one of their last appearances at Madison Square Garden. I went up to their hotel room and they gave me an autographed baseball cap.
Oh, wow.
They signed. I have that down in Apter's Alley. Yeah.
That's fantastic. How about we go with, I'm going to go with one of your favorites of all time, Mike, Rowdy Piper.
Rowdy Piper? Why would he be a favorite of mine? Roddy was great because Roddy was a character, and I love characters. And I interviewed him dozens of times, and there's a lot of them on onewrestlingvideo.com. He was great. He was always willing to raise the voice and get really worked up on even simple questions I would ask him.
It's Rowdy for you.
Yeah.
Let's do the juicer, Art Barr.
I only met Art Barr once. Actually, I didn't know him that well. I loved his character, but I can't give you a lot about him because I didn't know him personally that way. Well, I knew Sandy Barr very well, and Jesse Barr, who became Jimmy Jack Funk. I knew him very well. Yes.
All right. Let's go with Art's best friend then. Let's talk about Eddie Guerrero.
Oh, Eddie was great with me. Eddie was, anytime I'd be traveling with some of the guys, and I'd always see Eddie in the hotels after the matches, and he was always exhausted. Always looked exhausted because he put more than 1,000% into every one of his matches. Sweet guy. He was always so nice to me. Anytime I needed pictures taken of him or talk to him about anything, he was always terrific.
Well, we want to stick with some charismatic characters. How about Muhammad Ali?
The greatest of all time. I like your speed. I like your style, but your pay so cheap, I won't be back for a while. So we also did boxing magazines, beside the wrestling magazines. And I got the opportunity to travel with Muhammad Ali quite a bit. And he was a huge wrestling fan. And down in Apter's Alley, and I'll show you next time we do this, once the weather is warmer and my heater works in Apter's Alley, some exclusive photos and posters that I took of him that no one else has seen. But you talk about a man who is charismatic at times, but a lot of times when he was training for like the Leon Spinks fight or the Ken Norton fight, you couldn't talk to him. He was totally focused and he didn't want to do his shtick. I still stay in touch with Gene Kilroy, one of his entourage who lives in Las Vegas at this point. Yeah, Muhammad Ali was one of my inspirations because I'm a character, and I always loved what Ali became. I really did. And I always recite his poetry. You know how fast I am? You want to know how fast? I'm so fast at night when I go to bed, I cut out the light switch and I'm in bed before the light goes out. I used to do my imitation of him for him all the time.
Because you mentioned your time in Toronto, let's bring up Frank Tunney.
Oh, Frank was great. Frank was a businessman. It was he was very serious, but I got smiles out of him once in a while, and he'd always be willing to pose with one of the wrestlers, not just to get his picture in the magazine, but because I asked.
Yeah.
We'll do a couple more with you, Bill, just because it's so fun. How about Andy Kaufman? We didn't get to talk about Andy.
Oh well,
today.
we never. Andy was a you know, I'm the guy who hooked him up with Jerry Lawler.
That's right, in the book there, yeah.
We are. Yeah, there's a whole chapter on that. I never found Andy's nightclub act funny. I loved him as Latka on Taxi. I thought that was and I loved him when he did Elvis. But I remember one time he took me to a comedy club in New York, and he had a plant I didn't know was Bob Zamuda, was his best friend and manager. And Andy started his act, and I was sitting at a table with Robert De Niro and Liza Minnelli and a whole bunch of celebrities. And Zamuda, about 5 minutes in, yells out from the front row, "Mr. Kaufman, what? F you." And he said the words. So Andy said, "Really? Well, F you." So Andy would go on. The guy would say, no, I mean really. And this went on for 15 minutes. And no one was laughing. And yet they worked it. They kept it up and they worked it.
The best time.
Because he always wanted to be a bad guy. He was never a comedian. He was a bad guy. And I also introduced him to Fred Blassie and to Buddy Rogers, who were his heroes.
That's right. They did that Breakfast with Blassie, I believe.
Yeah. And he loved meeting Buddy Rogers. Buddy was one of his all-time heroes. He wanted to be Buddy Rogers.
Okay, I got two quick ones, and then I'll let Tyler finish it off. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about Vince McMahon Jr.
Unquestionably, you're fired. Vince Jr. Was pretty much always nice to me. He was a businessman.
Yeah.
He had his own business, and locking us all out of his shows was a business decision, not a personal decision. And I can echo saying that because if that was a grudge, there's no way I would be on any of the shows in the WWE network.
Right.
Peacock. So.
And my last one is the man who wishes he could be half the cardboard champion you are, and that's Dan the Beast Severn.
Oh, well, Dan Severn he had illegally beaten me for the Cow Championship Office Wrestling belt. He had his manager, Phyllis Lee, hit me over the head with some stale bagels, and he pinned me. So he got the cardboard belt. But the end of the story is the year I was inducted into the Lou Thez Hall of Fame in Iowa. Dan Gable, Lou Thez Hall of Fame in Iowa. Severn was being inducted that same year. And he got up and made a speech, and he mentioned me in his speech. And then he said, "I just want to let you know before Bill Apter comes up that this man is just cardboard." And out of I hadn't seen this belt in years, out of his attaché case, he opens it up. He's got the UFC belt. He's got the NWA Wrestling Championship belt, and he pulls out the cardboard belt.
That's amazing.
And he used to put it under all his gimmick tables, and he gave it back to me that night.
Oh, and you still have that at Apter's Alley?
I do. I still do.
That's amazing.
So, I'm still the Cow Championship Office Wrestling Champion because he did not defend it after he gave it to me. The commissioner, Dave Gerhardt, who was an executive with London Publishing, returned it to me.
That's amazing. I'll do my last
two. Severn, if you're watching this right now and you still want a shot at Wonderful Willie, you know where I am. You've been to my house, brother.
Sorry. So
get carried away.
Oh, I wouldn't want to be in Dan Severn shoes right now. Let me tell you, those matches.
I'm telling you, if I have it my way, the headline and all the dirt sheets next week is going to be Bill Apter challenges Dan Severn.
Absolutely, it's a mutual challenge. And by the way, he calls me Wonderful Willie.
Wonderful Willie.
As he should.
Yes, because Wonderful Willie is champion, and it's Willie, Willie, no Y at the end.
No Y at the end.
See, now you got me all worked up into my Wonderful Willie.
Oh, well, I've got my last two names, and then we'll bring it home with you, Bill. It's been fantastic chatting with you so far. Let's go with Harley Race
on the VOC Nation podcast this week, depending upon when people are watching this. We're taping this on March 18th, 2021. We did a whole show about Harley Race. Harley Race was one of the toughest guys in the ring. He was what a champion should look like and speak like. And he was someone you looked at and said, this man, with or without a belt, is a champion. And his interviews were so great because he drew you, when I get Dusty Rhodes in the ring, I don't have a lot to talk about. But, he had that.
Yeah. I like his famous line that you always hear backstage. What's your finish? Smokes a cigarette. I'll move. I love that Harley Race line.
I never heard that.
Yeah, that's I read a couple guys' books, and then that's what they said talking about Harley Race. I think Flair says that.
I'm still that fan where I don't want to know a lot of the inside stuff. It's terrible.
Okay,
don't tell me you're losing the title tonight.
Yeah, I try to avoid it as well. I like to be surprised.
Me too.
So the last name I want to throw out there, we'll end it on a high note, is Bobby the Brain Heenan.
Oh, Bobby and I had this routine. He loved my imitation of Pedro Morales. And Pedro would always go, I am ready for any kind of action, baby. So anytime I'd be around the ring with Bobby managing Nick Bockwinkel or Lanza or Mulligan, Heenan would always stand near the ring and go, he would always do that. Also, when he was the broadcast partner on WCW with Tony Schiavone, anytime he'd be on camera, if you ever see him do this, he was looking right at me. One of the funniest people I ever met in my life. I loved him to death, and it was so tragic the way his life took such tragic turns with his illnesses and everything. I still talk to his wife, Cindy, periodically, but what a great, you talk about characters. Bobby Heenan was a character, and I love him.
Well, thank you for those stories, Bill. Before we let you go, I just would love for you to plug your social media where people can talk to you, and real quickly too. What's your favorite karaoke song? I know you're a hell of a singer.
Oh well,
My Way.
My Way is one of them, but I do a lot of Broadway and country music stuff. Right now, I do a lot of Toby Keith stuff, a lot of Tracy Lawrence, Kenny Chesney. My Way, of course, Pat Patterson made famous, but I do a different version, and a lot of Barry Manilow stuff. Can't Smile Without You
beautiful.
Has become my theme song at conventions, and you can find that if you just go to YouTube and put in Bill Apter Sings Can't Smile Without You. Yeah,
beautiful.
I'm a big man. I'm a fan of Low.
A fan. I like that.
I grew up on Steve Lawrence, Andy Williams, Tony Bennett, Tom Jones, and a lot of Broadway. You know what my favorite Broadway show tune is?
No one.
The sun will come out tomorrow. Bet your bottom, from Annie. I know it's a girl song, but I thought
it's a classic.
I thought the song was Danny. So, also, I'm currently involved in a new project that kicked off 2 weeks ago on the High Spots Network, where I am the host of the classic footage taken from the old-time video vaults of the Savoldi family, Angelo Savoldi, Mario Savoldi, and it's a lot of the old IWCCW shows, stuff before they became famous, of people like Stone Cold Steve Austin, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, the Putskis, and so many, the Godfather, in their formative days. So that's on the High Spots Network, and I host each one of those episodes. Yeah. So you got to go to highspotsnetwork.com and check out the Classic Savoldi library. You can follow me at Apter One Wrestling. That's the number one, not the word. Apter, APTER. There's no N in it, like Dusty Rhodes used to call me Willie Apner. It's Apter, at Apter One Wrestling. I'm on Facebook, but I only friend people that I know on Facebook. You can email me at bapter@onewrestling.com. And I'm not on Instagram a lot, but I go on there maybe once a week. And then I'm on terrific shows like yours.
We can't thank you enough for taking the time out. It was such an honor to get to sit down and talk with such a pioneer in this industry, Bill. You really are one of the
That doesn't mean I'm old, by the way.
No, not at all. But you are definitely one of the most influential
I'm a
men.
pioneer in the business. What did you say?
How about we go with this one now? One of the most influential people in the history of professional wrestling.
I appreciate that. And I'd also like people to subscribe to onewrestlingvideo.com. It's free. And check out after April 1st the premium stuff that will be on vocnation.com.
Oh, perfect. Well, make sure everybody check that out.
And don't forget to buy his book.
Absolutely.
What's that called?
I believe off the top of my head, it is called Is Wrestling Fixed? I didn't know it was broken.
You know, and don't forget Inside the Ropes magazine.
Oh, that's right. Inside the Ropes. So I'm going to go buy a copy of that right away.
Yeah, you can get it online. You can get the digital online. So it's a great, great magazine.
Oh,
great magazine.
amazing.
Thank you all.
Bill.
And as I always say, we'll see you and you at the matches eventually.